Welcome back to the Skillabration Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Lubing. And in this episode, we are wrapping up season 1. So this is episode 13, season 1. And we're going to do a little recap of the interviews that happened in season 1 and some of the topics we covered. And then I'm also going to share with you guys where we're headed for season 2. So stay tuned.
Welcome to the Skillabration Podcast, where it's career day every day. Your host, Nikki Lubing, is the owner of Skillabration, an online foreign language school for K-12 homeschool students. Nikki's experience learning Spanish as a second language led her to building a variety of skills that set her up for life, from soft skills to financial literacy. It's her mission to provide those same skills to youth around the world through the Skillabration Podcast. We'll be interviewing guests from a variety of backgrounds and careers, ranging from teachers to business owners and blue-collar workers. We're excited to uncover their wisdom and experiences, whether it's mastering a new language, honing leadership skills, or learning the ins and outs of money. We're here to take your skills from zero to fuego. Let's go!
All right, so in season 1, we interviewed 5 teachers. There were, including myself. So we interviewed 4 teachers, but there was also my story as the first episode. We heard from teacher Cherry, who's our Mandarin and Cantonese teacher, our French teacher, Mademoiselle Armour, Ramona Armour. And then we also have a college student right now who's working with us this summer. She is a double major in Spanish and French. She just studied abroad in France. So if you missed that episode, definitely tune into that because she has some really recent experiences with studying abroad in France. But she's multilingual. So not only does she know Spanish and French and English, of course, but also American Sign Language. So she's teaching American Sign Language, and we're already seeing some students join for her class with that. And she's minoring in Russian and German. So that was a really cool interview with teacher Rachel. And then our last interview, which was episode 12, was with Laura Mann. She's from Colombia. And, we talked about Spanish. She also knows French. So she's trilingual as well. So make sure to check out those episodes. But we also interviewed 7 entrepreneurs in season 1. So some of the entrepreneurs we interviewed were in industries like the blue collar industry. So if your children are interested in the trades, make sure you listen to that episode. We also heard from people who are professional speakers, and one of the professional speakers was Bill Haas. He also has a background in working in the Chicago pits in the stock market. So we talked about Wall Street, and we talked about his experience with professional speaking. He has a show as well that he does, his own podcast on the radio. And Precious Williams in episode 7. So Bill Haas is episode 5. Precious is episode 7. She's also a professional speaker. So if your kids are interested in speaking, whether it's maybe they're interested in theater, maybe they're interested in public speaking, debate, anything like that, where they want to hone their speaking skills, those 2 episodes would be great to listen to. And episode 6 was David Bellman to talk about owning a home. These are the kind of things that we don't typically talk about with kids. We're very focused on all the general subjects like math, science, reading, and history, but then sometimes we don't make time for these kind of things, those real world skills like financial literacy, like business, entrepreneurship, or even soft skills. So in episode 8, I talked with Amy Ratnow. She has her recruiting business where she matches women with small businesses, like local small businesses. And so she gave us a lot of insight on interview skills, resume tips, and soft skills that are needed in the workplace that we don't typically, sometimes we talk about Generation Z, and they may be lacking some of those soft skills that other generations have had. I know my generation, I'm an elder millennial, so we've also been kind of like known as that generation that came without certain soft skills. So, that's definitely something I want to hone in on the Skillabration podcast. We'll talk more about that in a minute, where we're headed for season 2. But and then the other episode that we touched on with another entrepreneur, we had 2 other entrepreneurs we interviewed. So Milena from Poland. So kind of mixing in like learning another language with immigrating to the US and starting a business in the US, learning from that perspective. Her business is helping other businesses organize themselves with workflows. So check out her interview on episode 10. And then one of the last interviews that we did, episode 11, was with the Perfect Day event planning team. So the owner of Perfect Day and then one of her employees. She talked about how she survived COVID with her business, because I know a lot of small businesses were hurt by that. So she talked about making it through that. And then just being a stay-at-home mom and starting a business, just the transition she had, how that all worked. It was a really cool episode. And then her employee, Teal, so that was the owner of Perfect Day Event Planning is Amy Kinsman. So she talked about all of that. And then her employee, Teal, was a former teacher. So it was interesting to hear from her, because she, kind of like myself, I left the public school system and started something new that was unexpected. And she taught during COVID. And it was interesting to hear her perspective as well on starting something new. And she also has her own business too. The last episode we did was with Laura from Colombia. And so now here we are in the very last episode of season 1. When I started this podcast, I wasn't 100% sure if we were just going to keep going for the whole year, for the rest of the year, or if we were going to break it up into seasons. But after doing a full season, I realized I wanted to take a step back and give myself some time to record the next season and kind of shift gears a little bit. So when I started the podcast, I had it in my mind, like, this is going to be like career day for, and that was the thing too. I was trying to figure out, like, is this for kids, like the youth, what ages specifically? And as I was doing it, I was like, this is more geared towards the parents to kind of inspire their kids who may be in middle school or high school, or maybe even in college, and maybe even going up to people who have graduated college, so early to mid 20s. But really, Skillabration works with a lot of middle school kids and a lot of homeschool families. So shifting gears here into season 2, I was thinking about all the skills that I do want to teach eventually on Skillabration. Right now, we offer live foreign language lessons. We have multiple foreign languages that we offer, and we have small group classes and one-on-one tutoring. So then I thought, well, how can I incorporate these other skills? And, why do I want to incorporate those other skills? And if you didn't listen to this episode 1, I talk a lot about why I want to incorporate these skills, but I'll just give you a brief reason here, like a brief summary. When I taught in the middle school, and even just, I would just say, like, as soon as I started teaching, I always had that feeling of like, we need to be teaching real world skills in school. And I'm sure a lot of people think that, I'm not the only one to think that. But since I have Skillabration, skills are a celebration. That's what it's a play on words, Skillabration. It's mixing those 2 words, skills and celebration. But I named it Skillabration because I wanted that ability to add other skills in as Skillabration grows. And I am very passionate about financial literacy being something that we focus on. And I think that's becoming bigger and bigger, not just in like the homeschool community, but also like certain public schools are starting to add it to their curriculum. Like certain states have it in their required curriculum in the law. It's now required to teach financial literacy in certain states. So I know that's something that's growing, and I think that's probably where we're going to be headed for season 2. And let me go back to what I was saying though a second ago. So talking about when I was teaching the public school system, especially my last 4 years in the middle school, I knew we were missing something when we weren't providing students with those real world skills. And I was even more passionate about it because I was working with immigrant students, and I know how empowering entrepreneurship can be for people, especially people in communities where maybe they don't have like a leg up. They might struggle, like socioeconomic status might be a little bit more of a struggle than for other families. So, and since I know how empowering entrepreneurship can be, that was one thing I knew I wanted to teach the youth of today, is making sure they have that skill of, you can start a business. You don't have to be stuck in a job that's like, there's no ladder to climb, you know? So I definitely, that's where that desire came from, to want to teach something else besides foreign language. But on top of that, I myself have always been a person that I would consider that's good with money. I learned about saving at 6 years old. My mom sat down with me and she kneeled down and she showed me the little bankroll, where, okay, this is the money that you're going to start saving, and you can use this for your future, like going to college. So just even having that conversation she had that conversation with me as a 6-year-old, and I can still remember it. It made a huge impact on my life and has led me to understand not only saving, but investing. So that is why I also want to teach financial literacy. And then the other area that I want to focus on at Skillabration is soft skills. Because, like I said, we hear about different generations. Each generation apparently gets worse and worse. That's what we hear. I do also believe, like, sometimes generations can get a little demonized, like the youth. Every younger generation gets demonized, like they're so awful, blah, blah, blah. You can't make this up. But it's our responsibility to teach those things. And I heard somebody else say that at a networking event I went to. She actually teaches Adulting 101 to, I think, to college age students and people who just graduated college. So she talked about that. Like, it's our responsibility to teach this. And I agree wholeheartedly. That's obviously why I have Skillabration. So I want to make sure that we're not just waiting to teach those soft skills. They have to be taught, now when they're in honestly, from elementary to middle to high school. Like, those skills, soft skills, teaching communication skills, teaching work ethic. So we can't expect people to come to work knowing these things if they don't know them, but we're expecting them to know them. There's got to be somewhere in the middle where we actually teach it, where we outright teach it. So Skillabration is going to be one of those places that teaches this. So, right now you're kind of seeing an entrepreneur in action. You're seeing me in action, brainstorming these things, trying to figure out how to piece it all together. Entrepreneurship is a lot of trial and error. And, I've had different iterations of my business. I started out, obviously, first I was a public school teacher. And then after I resigned, I started as a contractor. I was just self-employed from about 2016 until 2019. That's when I founded my LLC. It was not named, by the way, my LLC is not the same name as Skillabration. The LLC is actually Digital Consulting Solutions LLC. But my DBA, doing business as, is Skillabration. So that's something, you learn as you go. Yeah, I didn't know all of these things in the beginning, but the different iterations. So I started out self-employed. I started teaching online to students in China, and I learned a ton about the Chinese culture. And I went to Taiwan, and I got to meet some students there. I got to meet the people that I was contracted with at the time. And I taught kids and adults, and I even taught other teachers. Like, I coached other teachers how to start their own business online, doing what I was doing. I was recruiting, so I did a lot of different things. I tutored in person, I tutored online with Spanish. I even did some interpreting throughout those years. So I was having what you call multiple streams of revenue, multiple streams of income. And then 2020, I started shifting gears because I knew, like, the industry that I was in with teaching English to the Chinese, that it was going to start fading away. There was little whispers about it. And so hearing those little whispers, I took it seriously, and I was like, I have to try to find something else, because that was like my bread and butter. It was my main income. And my whole business was built around it, even with coaching other teachers how to do what I was doing. It was built around that specific niche, teaching English as a second language to the Chinese online. And in 2021, what I've heard that was going to happen, that those companies were going to either end or shut down, that ended up happening in September, I think, of 2021. And I had started what would be Skillabration. So I started teaching Spanish online to students in the US, but it was global still. But I started a Spanish one for middle school class that was really successful. And then I heard that I could create an organization through the marketplace, the platform that I was on, which is OutSchool, and we're still on OutSchool. But I started the organization through OutSchool. So basically, I subcontract other teachers that work with me on OutSchool. But we are shifting to adding lessons directly on skillabration.com. And that's part of why I have this website too, because as we expand, eventually we'll have probably the majority of our classes on skillabration.com. So, like, with the financial literacy classes, with the soft skills classes and the entrepreneurship classes, that's where I want to host those, along with the foreign language classes too. We'll see how it all plays out. But that's why I said you're kind of seeing the progress of a business owner right here live on this podcast. So look at that as an opportunity as well, because you can always learn from others. And you can kind of see inside my brain. It's kind of like behind the scenes or inside my head what's going on and how I'm planning all of this. And you'll get to see too how when you do trial and error, some things work, some things don't work. Really what happens is you can have an idea, but people out there might not want that idea. People out there, they may want something else. So what we call it is the market. So the market, either they decide that they want what you have to offer or not. And that's either a product or a service. And on Skillabration, we offer a service, which is live lessons, but we do have curriculum, like Spanish curriculum, and we will eventually have like pre-recorded courses too. We do have a little bit of that, but that's just not our main thing right now. But yeah, so it's kind of exciting for you to see where we're headed and how I'm planning it. What I want to convey in this podcast episode is that, I want to try to figure out how I want to deliver these other branches of Skillabration. One idea that I had was so foreign language is also called world language in schools. They changed that like right when I started teaching, I think in 2005 or somewhere around there. I remember being a teacher and they're like, yeah, so now it's not foreign language anymore, it's world language. And if you ask any of us older foreign language teachers, we kind of like laugh at that. We think it's kind of silly because they always have to change the name of things. But I could kind of use that to my advantage with Skillabration, because we could kind of make it where it's like an international focus of, okay, we have world language, we talk about the world economies, we talk about international business, but then kind of breaking it down smaller. So like within like the world economic branch, we then talk about basic financial literacy, but then we talk about like the world currencies, or we talk about, when you travel, like how does the economy in China differ from the economy in the US if you're taking Mandarin? So that's kind of how I was thinking we could unite those different topics so it's not disjointed. I think it is important to make sure that we speak to the people who come to our website, and when they come there, they're like, oh, this is speaking to me. So any successful business has to speak directly to that customer. You can never market to everyone, because if you are trying to market to everyone, you're not marketing to anyone. So I'm keeping my students and my families in mind of what they're interested in. And I definitely know, like I've seen the homeschool community, I've seen them talk about financial literacy. And I know that's just becoming bigger in general. But the people who come to our website, they're probably thinking more about foreign language. So in order to kind of pair those two up, and it's like, okay, what is this school? I don't want people to have that question. I don't want to people to think like, what is this school? I want them to be like, oh, this all makes sense. So if we talk about world languages, we also talk about the economies of the world. We also talk about doing business in the world. And then with soft skills, I thought that could be like a branch of communications. So communicating effectively in the world. So if you're listening to this podcast, and which I hope you are, I do see how many listeners we have, and we do have some, albeit we are, a small podcast just getting started. And but for those of you listening, I would appreciate your comments of what you think, especially if you are somebody who's interested in foreign language, if you have your students signed up with us, or if you yourself are taking a class with us. We have one adult learner right now, so it could be that we also offer these classes to adults too in the future. I met somebody through networking. I talked about this on one of the episodes about how, I think it was with Amy, because Amy introduced us, but Amy introduced a fellow contact, somebody through networking, and then I set her up with our French teacher. So that's why I said, like, as you go out in the world, you find out what the market wants. And sometimes that can make your business shift gears a little bit too. You have to offer what the people want. But yeah, so let me know in the comments if you're on YouTube, or you can email me, Nikki@skillabration.com, if you listen to this episode and you thought, yeah, that sounds awesome. Or you could do XYZ. I always look for input. So that pretty much wraps up season 1 and where we're headed for season 2. I really appreciate those of you who have been listening. I do have an ask of you. I would ask you, if you know anyone who has teens, like middle school age or high school age, and you think this episode would benefit them, please share it with them. If you know homeschool families that would be interested in this, because we primarily work with homeschool families, please share this podcast with them and tell them to share it with others, because that is how a podcast grows. So if you do want to support us and you do want to see the podcast continue, definitely share this, and even email me. Let me know. Let me know that you are interested in the podcast and you want to see it going, because the small creators of the world like me, I do consider myself a small creator in terms of how many people are listening or watching. It's not like if people say Skillabration, it's not like the whole world is going to know who we are yet. Down the road, eventually that could be, something that happens. But yeah, that just gives me motivation to keep going. So I appreciate you cheering us on and sharing this with others. And I look forward to seeing you for season 2. Season 2 is going to launch in I want to say August. I don't have the exact date yet of when to launch, but I would say end of August or beginning of September is when you should look for season 2 to roll out. All right. I look forward to seeing you in season 2. Have a good one.